Imagine spending most of your life able to read every letter on a page, thread a needle without thinking, recognize a face across a room, or carve a tiny detail into wood with steady hands. Then, year by year, something begins to change. The words in front of you soften. Fine lines blur together. You hold the page closer, but it becomes worse. You move it farther away, and for a while, the letters sharpen again. Eventually, your arm is not long enough. Today, this problem can often be solved in a few minutes. You walk into a store, try on a pair of reading glasses, and suddenly the text returns. But imagine living 700 years ago. There is no optometrist, no prescription, no lens chart, no factory producing inexpensive frames, and perhaps no spectacles at all. If your livelihood depends on reading, writing, sewing, engraving, painting, bookkeeping, or copying manuscripts, what happens when your eyes begin to fail? Do you simply stop? Do you change your work? Do you rely on younger people? Do you accept that part of your world is disappearing? For most of human history, people had to answer those questions without the simple tool we now take for granted. The story of eyeglasses is therefore much larger than the history of a fashion accessory. It is the story of how humanity learned to fight one of the most ordinary limits of aging, and in doing so, extended the useful life of the human eye. To understand why eyeglasses mattered so much, we first have to understand what was happening inside the eye. Human vision depends on light entering through the front of the eye and being focused onto the retina at the back. The cornea and the natural lens help bend that light so the image can be seen clearly. When we are young, the lens inside the eye is flexible enough to help us focus at different distances. As we age, that flexibility gradually decreases. The lens becomes less able to change shape for close work. The result is presbyopia, the familiar age-related difficulty that makes small print harder to see and often forces people to hold reading material farther away. It is not a disease in the usual sense. It is a normal part of aging. For a modern person, presbyopia can seem like a minor inconvenience because reading glasses are everywhere. But before corrective lenses were available, the condition could alter a person's independence. A scholar who had spent decades reading manuscripts could suddenly struggle to make out the letters. A seamstress might have difficulty threading a needle. A goldsmith could lose the ability to inspect tiny details. A merchant might need someone else to read small writing in an account book. A physician or apothecary might struggle with labels, notes, or delicate instruments. The body had not lost intelligence, knowledge, or experience. It had simply lost the ability to focus clearly at close range. Not every visual problem was the same. Some people were nearsighted and could see nearby objects clearly while distant objects appeared blurred. Others were farsighted and had greater difficulty with near tasks. Astigmatism distorted focus in different directions. Cataracts could cloud vision. Injury and disease could damage the eye in ways no simple lens could fully correct. The important point is that the phrase bad eyesight hides many different experiences. One person might struggle to read a page. Another might read perfectly well, but fail to recognize someone across the street. Early spectacles did not solve all of these problems at once. Their first great success was helping people who had difficulty seeing close objects clearly, especially older readers. So what did people do before glasses? The simplest answer is that they adapted. Human beings are remarkably good at rearranging their behavior around physical limitations. A person who found small text difficult might move closer to a window or doorway where sunlight was stronger. He might hold the page farther away. A craftsman could use larger tools or avoid the smallest details. A scribe might ask a younger assistant to read a difficult line. An elderly scholar could dictate to someone else instead of writing every word by hand. A seamstress could work during the brightest part of the day. A merchant could ask a clerk to handle close reading. A person with nearsightedness might simply move closer to whatever he needed to see. These adaptations worked, but only to a point. Brighter light can improve contrast, but it cannot restore lost focusing ability. Moving a page farther away helps only until the print becomes too small. An apprentice can perform detailed work, but that means the master becomes dependent on someone else. Dictation can preserve ideas, but it changes the way a scholar works. The deeper problem was not simply that people could no longer see clearly. It was that experience and skill often increased at the same time that close vision declined. A person might reach the most knowledgeable stage of life just as the eye began making detailed work more difficult. This is what makes the invention of corrective lenses so profound. Many technologies give humans abilities we never naturally possessed. Eyeglasses do something different. They restore an ability that the body is gradually losing. They do not make the mind smarter. They allow the mind to keep accessing the visual information it already knows how to use. Long before spectacles appeared, people had noticed that transparent materials could change the appearance of objects. Curved pieces of crystal or glass could bend light. Certain shapes could make small things appear larger. Ancient and medieval people did not possess modern optical theory, but they could observe effects directly. If a curved transparent object placed over writing made the letters look bigger, The practical value was obvious. One of the important steps towards spectacles was the reading stone. A reading stone was essentially a convex piece of transparent material placed directly on top of a manuscript. Instead of being worn on the face, it rested on the page. The curved surface magnified the letters beneath it, allowing an older reader to make out text that had become difficult to see unaided. Imagine an elderly monk in a medieval scriptorium. For decades, his work has depended on tiny letters. The room smells of parchment, ink, wax, and wood. Light enters through a narrow window. He bends over a manuscript, but the words have become soft and uncertain. Then he places a rounded, transparent stone over a line. The letters beneath the stone enlarge. Edges become easier to distinguish. He slides the stone slowly along the page, and for the first time in months, or perhaps years, the text becomes manageable again. The device was limited. It magnified only a small area. The reader had to move it, line by line. It could not help someone walk through a room or work with both hands on another object. It did not correct the entire field of vision. Yet, conceptually, it represented a major shift. Vision itself could be altered by placing a shaped, transparent material between the eye and the object. That realization eventually raised an obvious question. If the lens works on the page, what happens if the lens is moved in front of the eye? By the late 13th century, recognizable spectacles appeared in Italy. The exact identity of the inventor remains uncertain, which is one of the most fascinating parts of the story. Many important inventions are linked with famous names. Eyeglasses, despite their enormous impact on daily life, do not have a universally accepted single inventor. Historical claims have been made over the centuries, but the safest conclusion is that spectacles emerged from a developing tradition of glassmaking, lens grinding, optical knowledge, and practical experimentation, rather than one perfectly documented moment in which a single person suddenly created them. The earliest spectacles looked very different from modern glasses. They were often made from two convex lenses mounted in separate frames and joined together by a rivet. There were no long side arms resting over the ears, no adjustable nose pads, no lightweight plastic frame. The user balanced the device on the nose, squeezed it into position, or held it with one hand. They were awkward, but the visual effect could be astonishing. Imagine an aging reader trying such spectacles for the first time. Before lifting them, the manuscript looks gray and uncertain. Individual letters seem to melt together. Then the lenses move into place. The text sharpens, lines separate, tiny marks reappear. The change does not have to be perfect to feel miraculous. The user is not being given a new skill. He's being given access to an old skill that age had begun taking away. This is the emotional center of the history of glasses. For a person whose identity depended on reading or detailed work, spectacles could return a part of life that seemed permanently lost. The first lenses were primarily useful for near vision problems associated with age and farsightedness. They were convex, meaning they curved outward and could help focus light in a way that made close objects easier to see. But someone with myopia had a different problem. A nearsighted person could often see a book clearly while distant faces, signs, and landmarks blurred. Correcting that required concave lenses, which bend light differently. These became part of spectacle history later. That difference matters because early glasses were not universal devices. A medieval reader who struggled with close text could benefit from them. A young, nearsighted soldier who could not clearly see a distant signal might not. The technology had to evolve before it could address a broader range of visual conditions. Frame design also became an engineering challenge of its own. A lens is useful only if it stays in the correct position. Early rivet spectacles could slip, move, or need to be held. This may sound like a small inconvenience, but imagine trying to copy a page while using one hand to keep your glasses in place, or trying to carve a tiny pattern while the lenses shift every time you tilt your head. Better optics alone were not enough. Spectacles had to become wearable. Over centuries, frames changed. Some designs were made to grip the nose more securely. Others were handheld. Later came forms with side pieces extending toward the ears, allowing the wearer to move more freely. There were pince-nez spectacles that pinched the nose, lorgnettes held by a handle, monocles for one eye, folding frames, and eventually the familiar temple arms of modern glasses. Each design reflected the same problem. How do you place a corrective lens exactly where it needs to be while allowing the wearer to live normally? The answer changed spectacle use dramatically. Once both hands were free, glasses became far more practical for craftspeople, writers, printers, musicians, merchants, scientists, and anyone else who needed to see clearly while doing something complex. At roughly the same time, another revolution was creating more reasons to see fine detail clearly: printing. Before the printing press transformed European book production, manuscripts were expensive and slow to reproduce. Trained scribes copied them by hand. Books existed, but they were far less common than they would become later. With the spread of printing in the 15th century, written material became more abundant. Books, religious texts, legal documents, commercial records, pamphlets, and scholarly works circulated more widely. This created a powerful relationship between spectacles and literacy. More reading increased demand for clear, near vision. Spectacles allowed older readers to continue working with printed material. The two technologies reinforced one another. Imagine a scholar in his 50s in a world without glasses. His mind may be filled with decades of study, but the words are becoming harder to see. Now imagine the same scholar in a world where a pair of lenses can restore his reading vision. Suddenly, the useful life of his knowledge extends. He can keep studying, writing, correcting, teaching, and commenting on texts. A printer faces a similar challenge. Tiny errors in type can change meaning. Proofreading requires close attention. A pair of spectacles can make the difference between seeing a mistake and missing it. A merchant must examine numbers. A mapmaker needs fine lines. An engraver works in tiny spaces. A watchmaker later depends on precision. The more societies rely on written and detailed visual work, the more valuable corrective lenses become. This is why glasses had an impact beyond personal comfort. They supported entire systems of knowledge. They helped people continue performing tasks that became increasingly important in literate, commercial, and scientific societies. Over time, spectacles also became objects that could be bought and sold more widely. But before modern eye examinations, how did a person know which pair to choose? The answer was often practical rather than scientific. A seller might have several lenses of different strengths. The buyer would try them. If the page looked clearer, the pair was useful. If not, another was tried. Imagine an older customer standing before a spectacle seller. He lifts one pair and looks at a short passage. The letters are larger, but still uncomfortable. He tries another, better. A third pair makes the words crisp. No computerized refraction, no detailed prescription, no chart projected across a clinical room. The basic test is direct. Can you see better? This trial and error approach was imperfect, especially for people with complex refractive errors, but it was far better than having no correction at all. It also shows an important pattern in technological history. The object often appears before the professional system around it becomes fully developed. Spectacles existed before modern optometry. Only later did scientific understanding, manufacturing, clinical testing, lens design, and professional fitting become more precise. As glasses spread, they also acquired social meaning. A pair of spectacles did not simply say, "This person needs visual correction." It could say many other things. Depending on the time and culture, spectacles might be associated with age, scholarship, literacy, wisdom, weakness, seriousness, or authority. Artists began depicting learned figures with glasses. Older scholars could be shown holding spectacles as symbols of study. In other settings, people might avoid wearing them because they did not want to advertise age or physical limitation. That tension continues even today. Eyewear can be medical, practical, fashionable, intellectual, or even deliberately stylish. Some people choose frames to disappear. Others choose frames to define their appearance. A technology created to solve a biological problem became part of personal identity. Frame materials reflected status as well. Simple spectacles could be made from inexpensive materials. Wealthier users might choose finely worked metal or other decorative materials. Over time, the frame became a place for design. Eyeglasses moved from awkward tools toward objects that could be elegant, yet the most important progress was still functional. Modern-style sidearms transformed everyday use. When spectacles could rest securely on the nose and ears, they no longer had to be managed constantly. The wearer could bend forward, look down, turn the head, walk, write, and work with both hands free. This may seem obvious today, but it was a major step. Imagine a craftsman using early handheld spectacles. One hand is occupied by the device. Now imagine the same craftsman wearing glasses that remain in place. Both hands return to the work. The improvement is not merely comfort. It changes what the person can actually do while seeing clearly. As lens technology improved, spectacles could correct more complex problems. Concave lenses allowed nearsighted people to see distant objects more clearly. Different strengths could be selected for different users. Eventually, one of the next major challenges became obvious. What if the same person needs one correction for distance and another for reading? This often happens with age. A person may already use glasses to see far away, then develop presbyopia and struggle with near vision. Using two pairs is possible, but inconvenient. One pair for distance, another for reading. Remove one, find the other, switch back again. The bifocal solved this by combining two optical powers in one lens. Benjamin Franklin is famously associated with bifocal spectacles in the 18th century. Whether every detail of the invention story is as simple as popular tradition suggests is less important than the concept itself. One section of the lens helps with distance, another helps with near work. The wearer changes focus by looking through a different part of the same lens. It is a wonderfully efficient solution. Instead of changing glasses, change where you look. This was another step toward modern personalized vision correction. Spectacles were no longer merely magnifying devices. They were becoming carefully designed optical instruments tailored to different visual tasks. To appreciate this significance, return to the world before eyeglasses. Picture an aging manuscript illuminator whose work depends on tiny brushes and delicate patterns. His knowledge has not disappeared. His hands still remember the craft. His understanding of color, composition, and technique may be better than ever, but the details are blurring. Without correction, the body begins pushing him away from the work. Now place spectacles on his face. The fine lines return. He can continue. That simple moment explains why the history of glasses belongs to the history of human productivity. Spectacles do not merely improve comfort. They can extend the working life of skilled people at exactly the time when those people possess the greatest experience. The same is true for readers and scholars. Before corrective lenses, aging could gradually separate a person from written knowledge. Large letters might remain readable, but small text becomes exhausting. Reading takes longer. Headaches or eye strain may increase. Eventually, the person may rely on others. With the right lens, independence returns. This has enormous implications. How many books were read by people who otherwise would have stopped reading? How many manuscripts were corrected? How many accounts were balanced, maps drawn, instruments repaired, letters written, and works of art completed because someone could still see fine detail? We can never calculate the answer precisely, but the effect must have been substantial. Glasses belong to a special category of inventions that quietly reshape civilization. They do not have the drama of a steam engine, the noise of a locomotive, or the spectacle of an airplane. They are small. They sit on the face. Yet they change what an individual human being can continue to do. They also reveal something about the relationship between technology and biology. The human body is not perfectly designed for every task society asks it to perform. Eyes age, hands tremble, hearing weakens, muscles tire. Technology often exists because humans refuse to accept every natural limitation as final. The spectacle lens is one of the clearest examples. The eye cannot focus correctly, so the lens outside the eye changes the path of light before it enters. Instead of repairing the biological lens directly, the device adjusts the world for the eye. That is an elegant idea. The body does not have to change. The incoming light does. Modern eyewear takes this principle much further. Today, lenses can correct myopia, hyperopia, astigmatism, and presbyopia with remarkable precision. Progressive lenses can provide multiple focusing distances without visible dividing lines. High-index materials make strong prescriptions thinner. Anti-reflective coatings reduce glare. Photochromic lenses darken in sunlight. Safety glasses protect the eye while correcting vision. Contact lenses move the correction directly onto the surface of the eye. Surgical procedures can reshape the cornea or replace the natural lens in certain situations. Yet all of these sophisticated technologies descend from the same basic discovery. Shape transparent material correctly, place it in the path of light, and vision changes. The first spectacle makers did not need to understand every modern optical equation to create something useful. They learned through craft, grinding, polishing, testing, and observing. Lens quality depended on material purity and surface shape. A poor lens distorted, a good one clarified. This practical craftsmanship was essential. A lens may look simple, but its curve determines how it bends light. If the shape is wrong, the image is wrong. Producing two usable lenses and mounting them at the correct distance was an achievement. The rise of glassmaking centers in medieval and Renaissance Italy provided the material and skill needed for better lenses. Venice and its surrounding glassmaking tradition became famous for high-quality glass. Craft knowledge spread. Spectacle making became a trade. What began as rare specialist objects gradually became more accessible. Demand helped drive improvement. Once people discovered that glasses could restore useful vision, they wanted better versions, more comfortable frames, clearer lenses, stronger or weaker powers, designs for different needs. This is another pattern seen repeatedly in technology. The first version proves an idea. The next generations make it practical. The early reading stone proved magnification could help. Rivet spectacles moved the lens from page to face. Better frames freed the hands. Different lens shapes corrected different visual problems. Bifocals combined multiple corrections. Modern optical science made the process precise. At every stage, the same human need pushed development forward. I know what I want to see. Help me see it clearly. The cultural effects became visible in art and literature. Spectacles appeared in portraits, illustrations, and depictions of scholars. Sometimes, artists placed glasses on figures from much earlier historical periods, even when those figures had lived before spectacles existed. This artistic anachronism is revealing. Glasses had become such a strong symbol of wisdom and study that painters used them to communicate intellectual authority, regardless of historical accuracy. In other words, spectacles moved beyond medicine into symbolism. They became shorthand for the life of the mind. That symbolism could be flattering or mocking. A bespectacled scholar might appear wise and serious. In satire, glasses could suggest someone old, pedantic, or overly academic. The object became part of how society imagined intelligence, age, and personality. Few medical devices become cultural symbols so powerful that people wear non-prescription versions purely for appearance. Glasses eventually did, but behind the fashion lies the original human problem. The page becomes blurry. Return once more to the medieval reader. Without spectacles, he has several options. He can move toward brighter light, hold the book farther away, ask someone to read aloud, dictate instead of writing. Stop working with small letters. Accept that the skill is becoming harder. Now give him a pair of convex lenses. The problem does not vanish completely. The frames may be uncomfortable. The lenses may have imperfections. The field of view may be narrow, but the letters return. That moment represents a quiet rebellion against aging. For perhaps the first time, a normal age-related loss of function could be compensated by a simple, wearable device. This principle would later define countless technologies: hearing aids, dentures, prosthetic limbs, mobility devices, and many other tools designed to extend human capability. Eyeglasses were among the earliest and most successful examples. Their value is especially striking because sight is involved in so many activities. Reading is obvious, but vision also guides movement, craftsmanship, recognition, navigation, and social interaction. Correcting vision changes not one task, but an entire life. For a nearsighted person, distance correction can make the world feel larger because distant objects suddenly become clear. Trees separate into leaves. Faces become recognizable. Signs become readable. The horizon gains detail. For a person with presbyopia, reading glasses do almost the opposite. They return the small nearby world. Letters, stitches, tools, numbers, textures. The two experiences are different, but both reveal how much clarity affects perception. It is easy for someone with good vision to think of glasses as optional accessories. For someone receiving effective correction for the first time, they can change reality in seconds. Nothing outside the body changes. The room is the same. The page is the same. The face is the same. Only the path of light changes, yet the world appears transformed. This is why the invention of spectacles deserves to stand beside much louder technologies in the history of human progress. The printing press increased access to information, but people still needed to see the print. Scientific instruments revealed new phenomena, but observers needed clear vision. Commercial records expanded, but merchants had to read numbers. Mechanical craftsmanship became more precise, but workers needed to inspect tiny parts. As society demanded more visual precision, eyeglasses became increasingly important. The invention also helped change the meaning of old age. In a world without correction, certain visual tasks naturally became harder with age. Spectacles allowed people to continue performing them. Experience could remain active longer. This had social value. Older scholars could teach from texts. Clerks could continue working. Artisans could supervise detailed production. Religious readers could study scripture. Physicians could read notes. Administrators could handle documents. The lens became a bridge between accumulated knowledge and continued productivity. There is something almost poetic about that. The body ages, but the mind may still be growing. Spectacles help keep the two connected. Over time, vision correction became more scientific. Optics developed into a rigorous field. Physicians and eye specialists studied anatomy and refractive error. Lens powers could be measured more accurately. Eye examinations became standardized. Prescriptions became individualized. The difference between early trial and error spectacle buying and a modern eye exam is enormous. Today, a practitioner can determine whether blur comes from myopia, hyperopia, astigmatism, presbyopia, or another condition. The health of the eye can be evaluated. Each eye can receive a different correction. Lenses can be designed with precise powers. Yet the user still experiences the result in the most basic way possible. Blur becomes clear. That is exactly what the medieval reader wanted. Modern society has made the solution so common that we rarely think about its historical importance. Glasses can be purchased in supermarkets, pharmacies, clinics, online stores, and fashion boutiques. Children wear them. Scientists wear them. Athletes wear specialized versions. Some people own several pairs for different purposes. The technology has become ordinary because it succeeded so completely. But imagine the opposite world. Imagine that everyone who developed presbyopia simply had to accept declining near vision. Imagine millions of older adults unable to read comfortably, sew fine patterns, use small tools, or examine detailed information. Imagine nearsighted people navigating cities where distant signs remain permanently blurred. The modern world would still exist, but countless individual lives would be more limited. This makes the history of eyeglasses a reminder that some of the most important inventions are not dramatic machines. They are small objects that quietly remove barriers. A pair of glasses weighs almost nothing. It uses no fuel. It contains no motor. It can work all day without electricity. Yet it can restore access to work, knowledge, independence, and confidence. That is extraordinary engineering. The device also shows how technology can become invisible through familiarity. People do not usually wake up and marvel at the optical precision sitting on their bedside table. They simply put on their glasses and begin the day. The same thing happens with many successful inventions. Once they work reliably, we stop noticing them. To recover that sense of wonder, imagine again the first generations who encountered spectacles. An older reader sees someone holding a strange pair of framed lenses. He looks through them and discovers that the page is clearer. There is no scientific explanation available in modern terms. No optometrist tells him about lens accommodation or refractive power. He simply sees. That immediate proof would have been enough. The invention did not need a dramatic demonstration. The user's own eyes provided the evidence. From there, demand spread through word of mouth, trade, workshops, scholars, religious communities, and markets. Lens makers improved their techniques. Frames changed. The object entered daily life. Centuries later, eyeglasses became so common that they reshaped language itself. We speak of looking through a lens as a metaphor for perspective. We associate glasses with intelligence, seriousness, style, age, and personality. The optical device became a cultural idea, but the core function remains exactly the same as it was for the earliest users. Help the eye focus. That simplicity is the secret of its endurance. So what did people do before eyeglasses existed? They adapted in every way they could. They used brighter light. They moved objects closer or farther away. They relied on assistance. They dictated. They changed tasks. They accepted limitations. Some probably left skilled work earlier than they otherwise would have. Others continued through difficulty because they had no alternative. Then magnification offered a new possibility. Reading stones in large letters, lens makers placed curved glass in front of the eyes. Frames became wearable. Printing created more readers. Optical science improved corrections. Bifocals solved multiple distance problems. Modern optometry made vision correction increasingly precise. The journey took centuries, but the idea remained consistent. Fading vision does not have to end useful sight. And that is why eyeglasses deserve to be understood as one of history's quiet revolutions. They gave older readers more years with books. They gave artisans more years with tools. They gave scholars more years with manuscripts. They gave merchants more years with accounts. They gave ordinary people something even more basic, the ability to continue seeing the details of their own lives. A child wearing glasses today may never think about the generations who lived without that option. An older person may buy reading glasses for the price of a meal and barely consider the technological history behind them. Yet every pair contains centuries of experiment, craftsmanship, optical theory, and human frustration. The story began with blur. It moved through crystal, glass, magnification, reading stones, rivets, frames, concave and convex lenses, printing workshops, spectacle sellers, sidearms, bifocals, prescriptions, and modern optical science. But beneath all of that history is one very human moment. Someone looks at a page and cannot see. Then a lens is placed in front of the eye, and the words return. That may be the best way to understand what eyeglasses changed. They did not merely make objects look sharper. They gave people back access to activities that age or refractive error had begun taking away. They preserved independence. They extended careers. They supported literacy. They protected the usefulness of accumulated knowledge. Before spectacles, fading vision could quietly shrink a person's world. A manuscript became harder to read. A needle became harder to thread. A face across a room became less distinct. Craftsmen adapted. Scholars dictated, families helped, and people simply accepted limits that today can often be corrected in seconds. Then, humans discovered that if the eye could no longer focus the world correctly, a carefully shaped lens could refocus the world for the eye. The earliest spectacles were awkward, fragile, and imperfect, but the principle was revolutionary. Biology no longer had the final word. From reading stones resting on medieval manuscripts to modern lenses worn by billions of people, eyeglasses became one of the most successful assistive technologies ever created. They did not make people wiser. They allowed wisdom to keep reading. They did not make craftsmen more skilled. They allowed skill to keep seeing. They did not stop the body from aging. They gave aging eyes another chance to remain useful. And that is the deeper story of the invention. It is not simply about glass, frames, or fashion. It is about humanity refusing to let blurred vision decide when a person's useful life should end. The consequences of clear vision also reached education. A teacher who could continue reading could continue teaching. A student with refractive error who gained correction could suddenly participate more fully in lessons. A clerk who could distinguish small figures could work more accurately. A navigator who could see instruments and distant markers more clearly could make better judgments. None of these changes depended on making the human brain more capable. They depended on removing a visual barrier between the brain and the information it needed. This is one reason eyeglasses became so transformative across different classes of work. The same simple optical principle served readers, artisans, merchants, scholars. travelers, and eventually millions of ordinary people. As production improved, lenses became more consistent, frames became easier to wear, and access expanded beyond narrow circles of specialists. What began as a fragile aid for a limited number of readers gradually became an everyday technology. That transition is easy to underestimate because modern glasses seem simple, yet simplicity is often the final stage of a long technological process. Behind a modern pair of spectacles lies knowledge about curvature, focal length, refractive power, materials, human anatomy, fit, and manufacturing precision. The user does not need to understand any of it. The success of the technology is measured by how quickly it disappears from attention once the world becomes clear. In the end, the achievement of eyeglasses is not that they defeated aging, but that they made one of aging's most common limitations negotiable. A person could lose some natural focusing ability without losing the ability to read, create, calculate, or work with precision. That distinction changed countless lives. It allowed knowledge accumulated over decades to remain active instead of being pushed aside by blurred vision. The device was small, but its effect was deeply human. It returned detail to the world at the moment when detail was beginning to disappear.